Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Chris Rossini, our co-host. Chris, welcome to the program.
Good morning, sir. Great to be with you.
Very good. We want to talk about the Fed, usually we do, in combination with an additional factor, other than the fact that the bubble has burst, and we're suffering from that. And that is, of course, the overreaction, is what I call it, to something very serious and very important. But overreaction any place can distort and mislead. So the Fed has had a lot of credit here, especially the last 10 years, even just a few months ago. And I've had it said to me the other day, I had an interview, and one of the interviewers said, well, how do you reconcile this? Well, how can you be negative? Because, just think of all the good things that have been happening, but they're gone. I thought that one of the most astounding statistics was that all the jobs created, not under Trump, but all the way back to 2008 when the other recession hit. And everything gained since 2008 is gone. Employment is worse than ever. And people kept saying, well, you didn't have any inflation, so that was good. Yeah, but that's not exactly what happened. They inflated the currency. They had massive distortion, massive increase in debt, and people tend to think, well, if the CPI didn't go up to 20% a month, then you really don't have any inflation. But there is a lot of inflation. The inflation is continuing because that's all they've been doing. The only answer to this problem of undermining our economy and bringing about fake prosperity is when it's revealed that it was all a mistake. It was based on false information, and the bubble burst and it's gone. And they're back to square one. This should not surprise anybody who has an understanding of Austrian economics, because that's what they warn us about, the distortion. And they also warn us that you don't know exactly how it will transpire, because it involves millions, if not billions, of individual decisions. It's the human action of people. Sometimes the money goes into consumers and they run up prices. Sometimes it just goes into the pocket of Wall Street and they run up the stock prices. They get free money, and what do they do with it? They buy stocks, and the stock prices go up. So it's a gross distortion. But the idea is that it is inflation that's the problem. It's the careless creation of the monetary unit. And that is, I think, exactly where the problem is. The distortion of the market ruined the most important price in a free market, and that is the price of money, the interest rates. So, but the prosperity was there, and they can show you how many people were employed. Standard of living went up, and it was the stats were unbelievably fantastic. But caution existed among the Austrian economists. They usually didn't get very many interviews on television because that dampened the enthusiasm for this, because their champion, really for the stock market, I don't think they ever complained about the president badgering the Fed a little bit and challenging them when they looked like they were sensing that, well, maybe interest rates are too low. Well, they said that with Greenspan. He kept the interest rate too low too long, but now it isn't too low too long. They're negative, and we don't even have interest rates. So what else could happen with this market demanding deflation? Well, maybe the oil prices will start back up. No, oil prices go to minus $40 a barrel. And this is all the type of thing that happens when you ruin the marketplace. And I think that is what's happened. The marketplace has collapsed. The stock market is the most important issue. The spending that has been done, all the mischief there. And then along came coronavirus. But other people don't see it this way. Matter of fact, I talked to somebody in the media the other day, and he was on the assumption that, it all started with coronavirus. Yet coronavirus is much more recent, because the statistics are showing, even to the end of last year, and of course others could see that the bust was coming. But no, the stock market had given up, a long time before, and all of a sudden along came coronavirus, and along came the reaction to coronavirus. Oh, we're having trouble. We're going to have trouble with our economic prosperity, so let's lock everybody up so they don't go to work. Let's violate their civil liberties. Let's make sure they can't go to church. And they'll need money. Of course they'll need money. They lost their jobs. Oh, we'll send them money. And we've been doing that. It is an illusion, and it's fake. It was a fake prosperity, and this is a fake effort to re-stimulate the economy by doing the same thing all over again.
You are correct, Dr. Paul, and everybody alive today is bearing witness to cascading government failure. This is what happens all the time with central planners, with empires throughout history. This is just the latest rendition of it, where everything that they do is wrong and everything that they do makes things worse. And this week we even saw Bank of America, of all places, came out and said, the Fed can't print gold. Well, it's about time that they're coming around, and they can't print food either. And our heroic friend in the House, Representative Massey, for weeks has been warning that, we could have food shortages next. How are Americans going to take that? And this one-size-fits-all shutdown was just the icing on the cake. It was so wrong to do. And one of the consequences was the oil that you mentioned, Dr. Paul. There's ships out at sea filled with oil, with nowhere for it to go. And meanwhile, the Federal Reserve, without any regard for the same principle that's at hand here, is printing trillions and trillions of dollars. Well, these dollars could end up just like that oil, where there's so much of it that it's worthless, that people, you have all these dollars, what are you going to pay, $50 for a loaf of bread? Whose idea was that? So we are witnessing, and will continue to witness as long as this goes on, cascading government failure.
Yeah, see, and a lot of people will follow up after they listen to us speaking, or we're visiting with people, and they'll say, well, we sort of, we agree with you. That makes sense. That's common sense. We ought to live within our budget, and we ought to cut back. Why doesn't government do that? And the answer isn't that difficult, because there's a little bit of pain with it to say, oh, you just cut back and everybody's going to be happy. No, somebody has to pay for this. And that makes people unhappy. And I've said so many times over the years that we're living beyond our means. That prosperity is fake. And an individual or a corporation or a country, if they live beyond their means, they're destined to live beneath their means in order to pay for the excesses that they've enjoyed. And that's what we're going through. And it is virtually impossible. I would say qualify it only in the sense if people woke up and decided that they wanted a free market and they wanted to go back to work and not argue, oh, hey, don't put me back to work, I'm going to lose my welfare check. This sort of thing is so ingrained. It's a political powerhouse for people to continue spending. It's much more popular to be for spending. I actually told my wife when I first ran for Congress, don't worry. She was worried I might get elected. Don't worry. Nobody's going to elect me because I'm not going to vote for that stuff. We have to stop it. But there are a few of you out there, and that's what we like about our program, that have known about this and encourage us and want to spread this message. But today, it's not going to happen in Washington. We have some good people in Washington, but sometimes they don't even vote on trillion-dollar budgets. They just pass it by unanimous consent. And it's just really outrageous, because if you vote against this, or if a significant number, or they actually did it, the people would riot. There'd be civil war, because the immediate thing would be more pain, because there would be no bailouts. So the real tragedy is the building of the bubbles. So it's very, very hard to contend with this in a political sense, because it's much easier to play the role of Santa Claus and saying whatever you need is going to be free. And that's where the Marxists that are marching around in Washington now get any bit of credibility at all. And the other thing that they do is they use what's going on now as evidence of the failure of what we believe in, which is absolutely incorrect. And it's a lie, because we don't like what they've been doing. We've been complaining about what they've been doing, and they would like to say that capitalism and freedom and free markets and sound money, that's what you ended up with, which is a total misinformation that people have bought into. And the real challenge we have is for those Marxists that are right there waiting to introduce a whole new program, has to discredit, the free market system of economics. And that's really, to me, the biggest challenge that we have. But you say, well, why do they do it if they know in the short run a lot of people are going to suffer and it's going to be chaotic? Why would somebody deliberately come along and distort and aggravate, the seriousness of the coronavirus? Well, because there are some who want to capitalize on chaos, and they do. And if they think that we're already, and Chris mentioned it, we're already concerned about the lockdown, which is disrupting all the information and all the markets, and there could be food shortages. There already are some food shortages. There's people that are hungry, so they don't want to admit that if you study history, let's just take the 20th century and what we've had here. Where do you have the most famine? The more socialized the economy is, you have a greater amount of famine. So the Marxist really doesn't care about that. Just think of how many people died of starvation at the hands of the German fascism and especially the communism of the Chinese and the Russians. That was horrible. But so that doesn't bother them. They're sociopaths. They don't have a conscience. So they will work on this. And this was really a gift to those who like that, because it was proof that capitalism doesn't work. And look at the stupid Federal Reserve. And look at what they did. We'll blame capitalism for that. And also the coronavirus. All of a sudden, right now, the information is coming out that the statistics aren't nearly as bad as was projected. How many people would die and what the percentage are. They just never counted the millions and millions of people that had coronavirus and never got counted, and now they're sort of picking up the pieces. So it was an overreaction. A lot of it was honest, and people were frightened and terrorized by the promoters of this. So it fell into place for those who would like to make total chaos of our country so that they can march in with a Marxist-type replacement of what we have today.
Well, we're doing our best to make sure that doesn't happen, Dr. Paul. And our viewers and everyone should expect that as government's failures pile up, they're going to continue to double down. They're going to continue to do the wrong things, but on a greater scale, because in their mentality, that's what you're supposed to do. Look what they've done through the wars. They just keep piling more wars on top of another. It doesn't matter if you win, lose, spending and debt, money printing, it's always just more, because from their perspective, they cannot let up. Our authoritarian societies take a long, long time to build. You need universities and media and schools and corporations, and everybody has to be on board with this. Liberty doesn't require any of this. No propaganda, you're free, go. Don't hurt anybody and don't take their stuff. That's it. But authoritarian societies, it's a big apparatus that they want to keep alive. And, we're starting to see in this country things that we're not used to seeing in the media with what's happening. We're seeing authoritarianism run amok. This doesn't happen here normally. It's stuff that you read that happens in other countries, and people try to escape to come here because they know that there's liberty here. Well, it is happening in America, and the only way out is liberty.
There have been signs around that we had been moving toward a more sensible educational system, not in the big universities, the well-known universities, but outside the universities, in the libertarian groups teaching Austrian economics. There's a lot more now. Nobody ever heard of that in the 70s, and I was questioned during the campaign in 08, and some of these people who were nice to me and friendly, and they would sort of look at me weirdly, and they say, well, what's this Australian economics? And they had no idea what it was, because everything that we have today is considered what free markets and capitalism is all about. And they do this, and they argue that that is the cause. If we're arguing that's not freedom at all, and they say, what is it? It wasn't socialism, and I'd agree. It's not outright socialism. It's not Marxism, but it is a definite form of economic policy that Mises recognized very clearly, and that is interventionism. And interventionism is just managers, the bureaucratic system, have wars that you can finance, the welfare state, and take care of the bankers and take care of the people that are in powerful places, and also have a Federal Reserve that prints money for special benefits and finances the system. So it's way way far away from a system that defends personal liberty and free market economics. That wasn't it. But what failed should be called interventionism, mischief, special interest government and economic policy. And it's been taught really especially since the Depression time. And then if I say there are some good people out there, more now than ever before, and I think that we're making inroads. But the one thing that happens, though, is the system still has all those individuals that have been falsely led into believing, that what we have today is about as free as we can get, and we have to defend it. Now look at it. Look at the mess they're going to have to defend now with the collapse of the whole economic system. But the whole problem is that our message, we have to work at it. But I'm pleased that we're doing as well as we are because we're reaching a lot of people. But you can't turn on mainstream media. You can't find that out. Can't read newspapers because they don't exist anymore. But the whole thing is that if you're interviewed today or over the last 20, 30 years, you never had anybody talk about Austrian economics in ordinary media to convince the grassroots people that, some of the fallacies here, they're usually justified in school. There's nothing wrong with deficits. You need deficits. And Keynes says you need deficits when you have a downturn. Well, that's been morphed into you need to bail out everybody all the time, and that's where they are today. To me, it's all philosophic, and you have to change people's mind. The universities aren't going to help us very much, and we are not going to all of a sudden, be called on for interviews. But you'd think if there were people there that were honest and half well read, they'd say, those guys that kept saying, hey, watch out, we have a big bubble here and it's going to burst. And they say, well, they were right, so why don't we get them on and have them explain to what's going on? Can you imagine that happening? Because they pumped this up for so long, and the whole system they pumped up, and they're not going to be called back. The good economists that believe in liberty and free market, they're not going to be called to the television for the interview at all. We weren't called during the building up. They didn't want to hear it, but they did more so than now. It was cut off like this. Don't entertain these guys because they'll make us look bad. They're going to point out the real problem. And of course, the real problem is the virus. The virus did everything. And that is not an accident. I think they blame a virus. It's invisible. It's hard to attack them. And then they'll have all the mischief they do. And then they say, well, there are people dying, and absolutely the case, and it's dangerous. But the statistics are stacked in their favor because someday people are going to do it, and they've already started to find out that there's a real explanation on the deaths of people with coronavirus, how the medical industry has been coerced into always using coronavirus in the top of the list of why people died. Constantly they do that. And the hospitals use it too because they get, I think, triple the reimbursement from the government if a person had the diagnosis of coronavirus. And probably 80% of the people that have been exposed and now are immune from coronavirus have never been identified, and they're starting to figure that out the more testing they do. So the testing, as unnecessary as it is right now, could be helpful in people understanding the extreme exaggerations of the people that had to put the scare tactics on everybody to accept what's going on now, that we just flood the market, flood the market with fiat money, more controls and regulation. Don't let the people go back to work. Lock them up, put them in a house under a house arrest, and everything will work its way out. Well, there's signs that the doors are starting to crack and people are starting to go out, and hopefully the momentum continues, and that will depend a lot on the people speaking out and talking about why they don't want a handout. They want They want to be allowed to act as a free individual, making their own decisions on where they go and how they can take care of themselves. So I see signs of that. Let's keep encouraging them to do exactly what we see them having started.
Yes, Dr. Paul, I'll finish up by echoing my colleague Daniel earlier this week. We asked for people to share our videos, and we can see that it is happening. Thank you very much for doing that, because everything that you do, not just sharing our videos, counts. When you speak out for liberty, it counts. Dr. Paul was in Congress for decades, and like he even said, he was alone most of the time. 400 to 1 with a vote, 400 to 1, 400 over and over. The one person that would not vote for something that was against the U.S. Constitution. And while he felt alone, when he ran for president, he found out that there were stadiums filled with people out there yelling, "End the Fed, end the Fed." Do you think anybody could have ever planned that? Any political task force or committee could have ever put a blueprint? There are people that love their freedom in this country. And, George Washington said that liberty, when it takes root, is a plant of rapid growth, because liberty is the truth. And if you want to live, you have to live by the truth. You can't walk around thinking that 2 + 2 is 5. You're dead meat if that's what you think. So, the point for all of us is to stare this darkness right in the face and speak the truth, and everything that we do counts.
Wonderful, Chris, and I want to follow up on that because I think the one thing that amazed me and I was so pleased with was the crowds did come out and they applauded the message I had. And the message wasn't complex. It was just take care of yourselves. It's your life. You should be able to run your life as you see fit. The government should be in your bedroom. They should allow you to earn money that you can earn, and you ought to be able to decide how to spend it. And that we ought to have better environment here by keeping our government and our country out of wars. And it's not a complicated message. And it also emphasizes, civil liberties. Now, the thing that I was so pleased with, and this even occurred, I guess, an eye-opener was when I was on Berkeley campus, because the turnout was really great. But it wasn't libertarians. There weren't enough libertarians. Constitutional conservatives, there were some, they were there. But there was just a run-of-the-mill people and a lot of progressives. Now, progressives in the Democratic Party right now are falling way behind, as are the constitutional conservatives have fallen way behind in the Republican Party. And the people that now come together on the issue of liberty, I think that is great, because if you make sure people understand what liberty is, it's not aggressive. It's not telling you how to run your life or how to spend your money. It's to bring people together. People who have a faith or people who don't have a faith. In a free society, you get to make up your own mind. So liberals and progressives and people who care about the common man and prosperity, we should all come together, even though our lifestyles could be completely different. That's, to me, I think, the magnificent message there. And I'll tell you what, we're starved for a message, and I think if more people would look at this wonderful message of liberty and allow people to get back to work as soon as possible and let them keep the money they earn. I'll tell you what, we'd be a lot better off real fast, and the economy would pick up faster than most people would realize. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.